And good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today on today's Wednesday webinar, another summer camp update, which is going to be fantastic as always. And as many of you know who have been here before, we have our last Wednesday of the month, we do our summer camp updates. So be sure to tune in every Wednesday, the last Wednesday of the month, and we'll have updates. We're going to have Chris Harold and Todd McDonald are getting all the details here, which is going to be great. And so we'll get started here. And let's first do the latest news. As you know, for those of you who have attended a few webinars, we try and just take a few minutes of everyone's time just to give the latest news updates. So let's just dive into that. First of all, for those of you who haven't seen this, we've mentioned it quite a few times before, but check it out. There are new restarting rules, guidelines, recommendations, our whole task force. And actually, Todd, who you'll see here today, he has been super involved with this and some fantastic recommendations on how to safely restart scouting. I know for our troop, we met last night and it was so energetic, let's just say, to have all the kids meeting again, and it was so much fun. So it's been really, really awesome. There's just recommendations for how to restart for small groups in cohorts, if you will. So check that out. Go to cpcbsa.org/webinars for really all of the details there. There's a download there, as you see here, this COVID meeting guide. So it is currently for Oregon only right now, but check that out. Really great information there. Also, Norwest Scout Shop here has some awesome deals that just got announced, and a 25% off adventure gear sale. So give them a call, check it out. Go to cpcbsa.org/scout shop. Give them a call. They've got lots of great COVID safety measures in place and all of that. And so you get lots of good deals. It's pretty impressive. And it ends March 14th, so get in on that. Our spring fundraiser is underway, as you know, Snack Attack. So you can get all the details at cpcbsa.org/snack attack. There's even a link there for those of you who haven't heard of any units who are selling or any scouts that are selling and you want to support them. Go there and you can fill out a little form and we will guide you to the closest scout or scout unit in your area who's doing Snack Attack. So you can get some tasty treats from them. And let's see, Camp for All is on. As you know, there's lots of great resources, lots of great information at cpcbsa.org/start Camp for All. That's for all the units there. There's some great information there, step by step, how to promote this, how to do this with your units. It's going to be fantastic. So check that out. This is brand new and very exciting. Merit Badge Madness, a reboot of the Advancement Academy is underway. Planning is underway as we speak. There is going to be this awesome opportunity to earn merit badges before summer camp and all of that. So check it out. This is right around spring break and everything. Some great opportunities to dive into merit badges. So far, about 20 merit badges are included, and that is including family life, as you see here, personal management, dog care, pioneering, scholarship, genealogy, digital technology, and tons more. We'll have signups coming soon, likely next week. So be sure to check out your Compass Points email. Also check us out on Facebook, and we'll let you know next week at the webinar too, where you can sign up for that. So really exciting. A couple just quick event updates and some deadlines just so you know about. February 28th is the application deadline for the National BSA Duty to God Award. March 13th is the OA Virtual Rendezvous, and there's actually going to be one in person in October. Okay, so just so you know that. March 18th is the Salem Impact Hour. April 29th is the Portland and Lake Oswego Impact Hour. Some great events to just hear what's been happening locally with scouts and to help support scouts in those areas. So check those out. Also, May 20th and 21st is the 19th annual Sporting Clays Shootout. Pretty awesome. If you have any auction items you'd like to get involved with and help us out there, that'd be great. Check it out at cpcbsa.org/shootout. Really fun event there. Also, July and August, we have National Youth Leadership Training. So sign up for that now. It's actually open and available. Registration is open, so check that out. And like I mentioned, OA Rendezvous is in October, on October 8th through 10th. So some awesome, great stuff. And Chris Harold might end up putting a plug in here, so just be forewarned about camp staff. They had interviews last weekend, right, Chris? Actually, you want to say just a smidge about that? That'd be fantastic.
Well, sure. We got about 85 staff members cooking through the process right now who've interviewed or had positions offered. And then we also have another group of people who applied but haven't yet interviewed. And so we're working on reaching out to them. That's all good, but we need about 300 staff members to run our summer camps for the summer. So we need to keep finding those people. So if you or a loved one knows of people who would be awesome summer camp staff, please send them our way. We would love to give them a great way to spend their summer. Both Todd and I started, maybe one of our first jobs was working at Scout Summer Camp. And oh my goodness, it clearly stuck in a good way, in the best way. So
apparently, and there's something for everyone. There really is, right? It's we've had scouts in our troop. They worked on the waterfront, they worked with the bikes. I mean, there is just and even if you like to cook and clean, by golly, you could do that too. If you like flipping pancakes, right? There's opportunities for that too, right?
That's right. Yeah, you don't always have to be the rah-rah, go get them, outgoing kind of type. You can be the internally rah-rah kind of person who just gets things done.
Yes, awesome. So really great. So please, if anybody who's 15 years old and up, there are opportunities. So check that out at cpcbsa.org/campstep. There's a whole outline on how to go about it, the step-by-step on how to reach out to Chris and all of that and get more information and get interviews going. So check that out. Of course, all of this is at our calendar on the website at cpcbsa.org/calendar. We also do our best to keep everything updated on Facebook as well. Lots of great updates on Facebook too. And of course, all these webinars are in the can, so to speak, and we do audio versions of these as well at cpcbsa.org/webinar. So enough of my babbling. As always, it is time now to toss it over to Chris and Todd, who are going to give us the latest and greatest on summer camp. Take it away, gents.
Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for that lovely introduction. Next slide, please. We're gearing up for our summer still. If you have been on our prior two webinars, what you might expect today is some nuanced changes. And I'll explain that in just a second, and we can bump to the next slide. Because in a way, our summer camps are stuck in limbo. We're still pushing forward on every front where we can. However, I would share with you that we're stuck in limbo as we're waiting for the governor's office and the Oregon Health Authority to make decisions about what will be allowed and not allowed at camp. That's not new from last month, but we're still there. And that's the part that's ongoing. So it's pretty hard to tell you, we're going to offer basketry merit badge at 10 o'clock at Camp Meriwether when we don't know if what the governor is going to allow us to do and what format camp will take. The format of camp will then dive in, help us determine what's going on with basketry merit badge at 10 o'clock or whatever time it might be. So we all of us wish we had a little more information in terms of program specifics as of today. But that's where we're at. We're at that spot. So we're continuing to prepare. I'll fill you in a little bit just right now on the program guide piece, and then we can go quicker when we get there. Program guides, we mentioned at the last webinar that we thought we might be able to have them done. The rough guide for today, we engaged our camp directors. We were working on those. They're not at a point to distribute to you yet. When they do come out, you should expect the first guides to be truly the rough guide. Here's where camp is. Here's what to expect when you arrive. Here's the kinds of programs you can expect, but not the specifics of the merit badge classes and those sorts of things until later in the process. The way the state is, and I'm not saying this out of any kind of animus against the state or anything like that. Just that again, until we know what's allowed, it's just not responsible of us to put forth a schedule of something that's that clear and specific for you, because it'll just change. And then that's not good for any of us. Planning on something that's not plannable is kind of not a good place to start for us. So we'll continue working at that. We will continue putting out information as soon as we know we can move forward on it. So that's what to expect on the program guide. The final guide, even then, usually has a few late changes, but I would expect mid to late April for the guide, and then the final that with the last minute changes as late May. So that's late in the game for sure, but that's the It's a world we're faced with right now. So different from any other time we've tried to do this. So that's the program guide. We'll go through our working assumptions, which have changed mildly since last time. We get a steady stream of questions, and we found some themes in those, and we'll answer some of those, as well as what questions you have along the way. Help you prepare in any way we can, and then help you know what to expect in the next couple of months as we finish up our preparations for camp together. So let's get into it. Out of limbo and into the fun of camp. These items, you might say this slide looks just like the one you showed us last month. It is. The preparations are continuing along these same lines. And if you weren't at last month's, it's important that you know how we're preparing. We have a voice with our state government, particularly through a group called the Alliance of Oregon Camps, which involves 2 giant camp alliances that represents about 170 camps in the state of Oregon, who are all licensed. And so that organization, we are on the steering committee to help them communicate through the state to the governor's office, who makes decisions, to the OHA, who makes the specific recommendations of how camps could operate. The American Camp Association has issued a field guide that explains in great detail, how do you run a dining hall when there's COVID? How do you run a, I'm trying to think, just the different camp activities. It's got chapters on how do you run the different program activities, and it goes into great depth, based not just on a bunch of camp people sitting around going, well, we could do this. It's based on an environmental health organization they've hired to do that. And you can take a look at some of that online too. It's called the ACA Field Guide, and it should pop right up as something you can see in depth, how to keep kids safe, how to run camp safely during COVID. National BSA has done a great job of supplying your camp directors and managers with regular webinars on the topic of COVID camp and how to do that efficiently. They're also active in supporting us in so many other ways. Questions that come up specific to our camps, finding us other resources. They're very good at that. Our national BSA is. Our local Cascade Pacific Council has a task force of volunteers, all volunteers, board members, professionals in the field, safety folks, a physician, pediatrician, camp manager, for example, all these people working together to digest the information that's coming out regularly and figure out what will work for operating our camps specifically, and really all our programs. That COVID task force is very potent and useful in making us do things the best we can. We've been contacting camps well outside our realm, as I mentioned, BSA and non-BSA, to learn from those who could operate last year and to learn from those who are preparing to operate this year. And those associations have made us tighter and stronger as we understand what to do. And then Oregon came out with guidelines for education, for reopening schools and for outdoor schools that have some adjustments. And they've had some conversations around day camps to this point, day camps specifically. So we've been able to learn from those guidelines what we might expect when they get around to doing the overnight camps. And then finally, our response, going on that other side of the screen, we've had responses of working with our managers and helping them get trained, helping our staff start to get trained for what they need to do. Our operations last summer were very helpful in giving us direction about going from up in our head what we think it might take to going what it actually takes when you get in camp with people who want to do things and how they do those safely. So that's been a very helpful part of the process. And we've learned about the mitigation measures and not just what they are and where to get them, but how to apply them when we get there. So tons of learning has already gone into this next summer. And so we feel prepared that given the opportunity, we can operate camp safely this summer for our kids and leaders and staff. So next slide, please. Ooh, bing, bing, bing. Good.
This is Todd McDonald here. We've been working with our COVID task force, which includes, physicians and pediatricians and the like. And it's very clear that the mental health impact of the last year is measurable. And for not only our youth, but our adults and everybody has been affected by this. And as we've sent out various surveys and things, people like yourselves are very hungry to be able to do camp. In fact, some of them would be willing to throw away all safety precautions and just do it because they're just so hungry for it. However, we believe, as Chris had mentioned, that we are going to be able to do camp and to be able to make it impactful. However, it probably is going to look a little bit different. We'll get into that a little bit. But, if we just talk about all the things that getting outdoors in our summer camp does for our youth, and the impact of that experience each year is significant and really a keystone to a Scouts experience. All right, let's go to the next slide. So, as you know, we're in limbo. Here's what we know is that we don't really know anything. However, we have a lot of experience and we're very comforted by several things about what we're seeing and happening in our local area and in the nation. I think that we really believe that, it's reasonable to expect that we can run camp at a minimal risk. Not that there won't be risk, but there will be, and that it will be good. However, and that the state will approve with a program that will work for us to do camp. The virus will be at risk, and we know through the ACA and our experience in working with our own units and things that we can mitigate those pretty well. However, that one part of our risk assessment that we'll get into later is that whatever cohort size is the largest amount of infection that we're willing to happen. So if someone was to bring in the infection into camp, cohorting is what allows us to keep that infection rate down to a minimum and not infect the entire camp. Because if that was to happen, the state would close us down. And so we would need to be able to show that we could manage this throughout the entire summer. Plus, we don't want anybody to get sick or especially those people at risk. I don't know how I can say this, but we all have this idea of what camp is supposed to be, and it does provide this huge set of expectations. But I also would challenge you that it also limits our ability and all of our abilities to see new ways of making this experience worthwhile. And we were considering those as well. So, and who knows, just like, nobody would have ever had the number of Zoom meetings that we do now. Even when this gets over, I think Zoom meetings or, online meetings are a part of our future because they have their place, and we found that. Well, we expect that's going to happen with camp this summer as well. But to expect it to be exactly like what we've expected before is going to be, you're going to have issues. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to go here shortly and go through each of the working assumptions. But remember, a working assumption is kind of like, hey, listen, instead of just saying, I don't know, we don't know, we use our best guess to come up with a plan that we think is going to work and that you guys can kind of hold on to as we develop. But with that, as you notice, is that we're trying to reach out to you a couple times every month via these webinars and emails and other things to keep you up to date. One thing we didn't say before is, we hope to learn more by April, right? So, we're not expecting a lot of big changes in the month of March as far as when we think the state will be able to kind of wrap their hands around where we're at and make decisions about the summer. Now, we also know, and Chris and I have been participating in national seminars and things like that, even with companies providing rapid testing and some communication about access to vaccines. that obviously is not, if you look at the media now, it's going to be very difficult. But the more people who are resistant to infection, and or that arrive, not infected, will make it safer for everybody. And so we do believe that these things are going to be available to us in the future. We're going to talk more about that here in a little bit. And then finally, as we are in communication with the governor's office and other councils and other camps and the ACA and all the things, is that we still don't think that we should expect anything before the month of April in the lines of any decisions. So, and so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Chris to kind of go over the framework of our working assumptions of things that we're thinking that you may be able to hold on to, at least until it changes, I suppose, as to how we're going to operate. Chris?
Thanks, Todd. Pesky unmute button again. There we go. So our first working assumption is that there's going to need to be some level of screening and or testing related to summer camp this year. And that is simply a way of making sure that we're using the tools that are at our disposal to keep everyone coming in the door safe. And then if something does happen, if there is some kind of a COVID outbreak, that we have ways to monitor that and respond to it reasonably. Camps who operated successfully last summer used robust screening protocols. A few used testing, but tests weren't anywhere near as available as they're going to be by this summer, and already are right now, frankly. You should hear the phone calls I'm getting from testing companies who realize that we run summer camps. They say, buy our tests, buy lots and lots of our tests. So the first step in screening and testing is what you and your scouts do before you ever get to camp, and what we and our staff do before they ever get to camp. It may be the most important part. So if the week before you come to camp, your crew is going to Aunt Mabel's wedding and Bobby's birthday party and all these kind of things, that's going to be a problem. We need to restrict our behavior, do a behavioral quarantine for, we don't know the exact number of days yet or anything like that, but somewhere between 5 and 10 days ahead of camp. That allows you to know your exposure has been limited. It's a crucial piece of the puzzle. We're hearing from our national organization and the American Camp Association that is maybe the most important part of the puzzle, is that you haven't come down with it ahead of time and you've been monitoring your health ahead of time. Each leader is responsible for gathering the pre-screening of their youth and other leaders. Leaders aren't exempt, and doing the health checks before arriving at camp. So that's the screening. The questions are very simple, basic ones. It's all those ordinary symptoms that we've learned to say in a bucket are what COVID looks like. But that screening form for each person. But the behavior is way more important than the screening form. We still require the screening form, but the behavior is more important. As far as testing ahead of camp, we don't anticipate that we're going to require a test ahead of camp. And that's for several different reasons that I won't get into. It gets all unrelated to cost, frankly. It's mostly about reliability and timing of, like, for example, if you've been recently exposed, it's 5 days later when certain tests come up of any kind of positive. So now you're talking about Thursday of camp and most of camp's done. So that piece of the puzzle is not likely going to be as prominent as we once thought it might be. However, if you're coming from any distance, your planes, your airlines, your trains, any other kinds of transportation might require that sort of pre-testing. So just be prepared for that. When you arrive on site, we'll talk about this in some depth, I think, a little later, but it'll be at a scheduled time that your entire group must arrive. So no 4 cars arriving hours apart. That won't be part of the plan this summer. We need the entire group that's camping together to arrive at the same time. At that point, there will be a rescreening, very simple. Again, the same questions in this group, any of the symptoms, checking through that and confirming that on reentry, on entering camp. Should we have any kind of outbreaks, we do have access and will have access to rapid testing that will allow us to do some determination of what next steps there are in terms of isolation, quarantine, et cetera, et cetera. We encourage all those, particularly those who have any kind of immune suppression, immunocompromised situations, people who are at risk for COVID, seek out the vaccination at their earliest opportunity. Our staff, because you're going between groups week to week to week, that is an important piece of the puzzle too, that we encourage that among our camp staff. And so we encourage that. In your campsite, there will be daily health checks. Again, just that same rescreening for the questions, likely a temperature check, not 100% certainly. But there is a log that will be required of just that the leader has checked in with each of the youth and adults in the campsite to make sure that there's no symptoms being exhibited. And then finally, when you return home, and this really has little to do with camp, frankly, but it's more about community spread once you return home, that behavioral quarantine happens again. Because if you did pick up something while you were at camp, you surely don't want to bring it home to your family and your community. So that's important. I do see a question popping up about visitors being allowed at camp for lunch and dinner. I would say that that's incredibly unlikely at this point. From what we know right now, if I were just telling you right now what we know, no, that's not going to work. Again, because there's a whole bunch of rigmarole to go through, and the less wild cards you introduce, the better. Even our vendors are going to have to come in masked and limited where they go, what they do, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So some limitations there for sure. I wish it weren't that way. I mean, all of us do. Yet the ability to get our kids to camp, I think some of those sacrifices are going to be worth it for sure. Can we move there? Thank you. What we're finding more and more is that these NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions, are the things more than anything else that stop COVID from spreading. You limit the exposures. This is, we talked about pre-screening arrival, the pre-arrival shelter in place or behavioral quarantine. We talked about that one. The daily health screening, check. We've talked about those already. We don't need to go through them again. Cohorting is one that we're thinking more and more that our state is going to lean us towards, or that's how they'll open, is some form of cohorting. What size of a cohort, all that kind of stuff, we're not clear on yet. We have some hints and clues from what they've done in other industries. PPE, your personal protective equipment, of masks in particular, are going to be necessary. But they keep using this great analogy of Swiss cheese. If you put one layer of Swiss cheese on, it's got holes, something can get through it. If you stack 6 or so layers of Swiss cheese together, now you got no holes. Nothing, stuff can't get through. And that's a great analogy for how we apply these layers of protection to keep our kids and adults and staff safe. So we also intend to use the disinfecting and cleaning strategies that we've not discovered for the first time, but applied heavily, much more in this last year. The hand washing that we've always encouraged, but now it may require more enforcement, just straight out enforcement of the leader's role may change some in making sure each and every kid washes their hands on a regular basis. Ventilating of indoor spaces. Summer camp is awesome because so much of it's outdoors. About the only indoor spaces we can think of are the dining hall and the little Adirondack mini decks that people sleep in. But even those aren't really indoor because it's just a canvas door and the breezes come through readily. So the ventilation of our indoor spaces is a piece of the puzzle. Dining halls especially are our area of concern there. Altered activities, that would mean those with more physical distancing, cohort based and some of those sorts of things. Places where people come in close contact, you want to minimize. Camp-wide gatherings would be probably not as we've experienced them before. And then finally, testing it can be a layer of mitigation there. So lots of layers, great study that the ACA did on our behalf. So yes, thank you. So that little yellow dot, that star, has been moving toward the right of the more likely thing of stable cohorting as the spring has progressed. I guess it's not quite even really spring, but you get my drift. We have seen that there has been more and more of a move that camp, we were hopeful that camp could open without strict cohorting, and that using other mitigation strategies layered. And that still might be the case, but we're leaning more and more towards it's looking like we'll need to be operating as cohorts, which as scouts, we have dens, we have patrols, we have cohorts. It's just another label. However, we don't, as our patrols, as our dens, tend to do quite as much together, have that much togetherness as what we might expect this summer. Our cohort sizes, it says here from, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the highlighted most important one. What they're saying is that space between people, masking protocols, and doing things outdoors, if you've got two of those three things, two of those three layers, those are the keys to running a safe camp. And frankly, of operating safely in society right now. Two of those three things, and you should be good. We are going beyond that because we expect the guidelines are going to go beyond that we receive from the state. So the cohort size, we're not certain on what that'll look like 100%. We know most groups have been saying either 10. Some of the latest things that have come out for outdoor schools have been up to 20 in a cohort, and classrooms have been 20 and maybe even larger at times. But applying those same rules to what we're doing, we don't know for sure what they're going to come down as. What this means for a troop going to camp, for example, is if you have 40 people in your troop come into camp, you're not coming as a troop of 40. Everything you do from the time you leave home to the time you get back home is in a group of 20, if that's the cohort size. So think about that implication in terms of transportation, in terms of operating a campsite, in terms of having enough adult leadership to have those separate groupings. Those are pieces of the puzzle. And if the state requires us to have that on the basis of 10 people, that same statement would be true on a basis of 10 people per group. So that's how that rolls out into our lives. We talked about the scheduled arrival times. Notice again, that troop of 40, if the cohorts are 20, that means you're going to have 2 arrival times, and those groups arrive separately and independently from each other at camp, with the pre-screening done separately and independently from each other prior to camp, with them operating all week separately and independently from each other. You get those words, separately and independently? That is tricky, but it's real. The cohort would share a sleeping area. So if you had a campsite with 2 cohorts in it, it would really be 2 campsites and would need to operate as 2 separate and independent campsites. Your eating areas that were assigned in the dining hall would be separate from each other as well. Part of this is because the protocol for when somebody gets sick at camp with COVID or COVID-like symptoms is that if one person gets sick, that person is isolated. The rest of the cohort is quarantined. That doesn't mean you can't do anything. It means you're even more separate than what the experience had been to that point. That's the way of controlling a spread. And for what duration and those sorts of things are not yet clear. Part of it depends on, does the person have COVID or not? So masking throughout camp, of course, is going to be required, and physical distancing as well. It may be that while you're in we don't know this for sure, that's why the may is highlighted, but it might be lighter inside your cohort, inside your campsite, that the masking restrictions may be lighter. Since you're traveling, eating, doing all these kind of exposures together, you certainly will not need to be sleeping with a mask. So that's That's one thing we're not clear on yet of how that'll roll out, but this is where we think it'll land for cohorts. Next slide, please. For food service. This one I think is simpler than the last one. Food service, we anticipate it being shift feeding where there's a dining hall. Our Camp Baldwin has campsite feeding already, and that will be relatively unchanged. We'll want to make sure that the cohorts are eating together. But again, that's patrols. That's relative. At Baldwin, that would be hardly any change at all. And then second, that you will, in the dining hall, have an assigned table. Those only assigned people at that table. We've done some recent, I guess graphing is the best word for it, of what would the dining hall look like. So you'd have your assigned eating times and your assigned table in the dining hall. Part of the things you're looking to avoid in that situation is cross-contamination, handing the bowls back and forth. It probably would not be family style, most likely pre-plated meals. You probably would not be going out to seek out your own coffee because the 30 people who touched that coffee handle right before you did, you don't want to be sharing germs with them. So there's some of the workarounds we're trying to look at is how do we structure that flow of dining? And fortunately there's lots of camps who did this last summer who were able to go to school on how that happened. They had a whole webinar strictly dedicated to dining and dining hall situations. That help us understand how do you structure it and interpret that for your camp and your situation. Let's see. These other points you can read. I don't need to elaborate on them. And then the hand washing, I do want to reemphasize that again. We will have increased hand washing stations and protocols and those sorts of things in place to make that easier. Let's move. Thank you. Program, potentially the trickiest one, but also the most fun one. Flip for a second to the very next slide, please, Chris, and we'll go backwards one. But there's lots of stuff you can do to have fun and still do scouting, even if we're doing it as a cohort. I love this slide that somebody presented at a recent conference on the topic. How do you do it physical distancing? Well, there's so many things you can do. And I really want to underline, underscore, highlight, and bold that there's lots you can do at Scout Camp, working towards the mission and values of scouting at camp and in the outdoors, and very fun. So while there's limitations, while it's different, we know we can do it, still be valuable, impactful, safe, and fun. All those things. Let's back up a minute there. In our program, Cub Scout Summer Camp has pretty much been cohort driven as you experience it already. Station to station, you're moving to stations together, you're at the dining hall together, there's a lot of togetherness, you're at the campsite together, those sorts of things. Those sorts of things don't go away for the Cub Scouts. Those are maybe just underlined a little bit more. You're together more. There might be the assigned time for the trading post, or the time when the trading post wagon shows up at your campsite with all the things you ordered in the morning. There's some ways that we can adapt those sorts of other activities in camp. We mentioned masking already. Aquatics is one area of particular interest. Typically the protocol there, as recommended to us, is that you wash your hands when you enter the area, then you go do your activities in the aquatics area, and then you wash your hands when you come out of the area. Your buddy is somebody from your own cohort. And so that'll be a matching up sort of thing. There are parts of aquatics that won't be able to be done. One we know right off the bat is life-saving because of the close contact required to practice those skills. So that's important. How many people can experience an activity might be less because of what's required in terms of cleaning equipment between users. So that's an area of concern for all of us. We did mention that merit badge class sizes would likely be limited, but 4 merit badges at most would be what we're expecting scout to be able to take this summer. I noticed there was a question about merit badges earlier, that can't pick different merit badges at camp. Yeah, yes and no. Yes and no. A scout, for example, take this example that a scout might go to the nature area. And when that cohort arrives at the nature area at their assigned time, there are options all throughout that nature area of what they can take. And so they've got that designated time. If there's things they cannot complete during their week at camp, they may be able to prepare with prerequisites outside of camp, either on their own or facilitated by some of our crew and staff ahead of their arrival at camp. So that will be a limitation. But I urge all of us to not think of summer camp for scouts as merit badges and advancement only. It is a great opportunity, but my gosh, these kids have been cooped up for a year. Let's get them outside. Let's show them what we've got. Let's give them some ability to run on the beach, to hike through the woods, to do this outdoor stuff with enthusiasm. And this summer, let's not worry so much about the advancement. It's important. It surely is not the only thing that is of value to a scout. Think of our packs and troops. If we were high functioning packs and troops all around, gosh, the opportunity to work as a team, to have the older scouts coach the younger scouts in some of their activities. Think of year round how much better our packs and troops would be. Is if we're building them intentionally at summer camp. We may come out the other side of this and find that merit badges are one important core piece of camp, and so is some intentional building of leadership and group activities, small group activities. So that's my little rant on merit badges, if you don't mind. Camp-wide activities are essentially super spreader events in terms of the protocols that we need to take. So we will not be having large group flag ceremonies. We will not be having large group campfires. But again, there's ways around all this stuff. In your campsite, having a flag ceremony, again, that's your building strength and skill there, and having some good examples of how to do it from people inside your troop or pack. Also, Camp Merriweather came up with a really cool idea. And at this point, that's what it is. It's an idea. But what if you, instead of having a campfire where you've got 400, 600 people there, barely hearing the skid at the front of the campfire bowl, instead, you're on the beach and there's a series of 10 campfires on the way down the beach. And as your cohort goes down at each campfire, there's a skit or a song or a story at that campfire. And you experience campfire in sort of a moving drive-through sort of a fashion. I mean, there's ways around this stuff, and our camp people, if anybody I know, have the creative chops to pull it off in a very impactful and joyful way. So there's that. Let's see. If some of our camps have off-camp property activities, the concern with these is where our camp people come in contact with those in the local communities. And this is not just a concern for our scouts, but the local communities in turn have shared some of those concerns. So on one hand, that would be limited but the protocols would be in place when they go do those off-camp activities as well. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the whole cohort does the exact same merit badges, but the cohort is most likely going to be in the same program area at the same time on a schedule. So if you're in the aquatics area, there might be 7 different options for you, some merit badges, some activities. If you're in the nature area, there might be 10 or 12 different merit badges. I know there's more than that in the nature area, but they're, so each person would not be doing the same thing, the same merit badge at the same time, unless they wanted to. That's my belief in how it will roll out. But if you've got 4 nature counselors at the area, the teaching style may be different as they proceed through their merit badge instruction times. Note that there will be a lot more activities outside of merit badges as well. What you will see a lot less of is independent scouts. You don't see much of this at the Cub Scout level anyway, but at the Scouts level, what you'll see a lot less of is independent scouts with their buddy wandering around camp on their own. That's probably a problem in terms of being able to supervise or manage scouts from doing the protocols that will need to happen this summer. Okay, plan C through C. Todd, I'm going to turn these over to you because we do have other plans in case the ones we're sharing don't come out the way we think they're going to.
Yeah. So first, I think Chris, I want to correct something that Chris had said, and that is that our current hope and working assumption is that we'll be able to organize camp in such a way that buddy pairs could indeed go do activities together, and we'll social distance and separate and mask for those activities. However, the guidance that we're getting at this stage from the CDC, other camps out there, is this kind of more of a cohort model. So we're going to talk about that here. If the things, the greatest factors that are going to need to be in place is the state, or the state of Oregon is pretty conservative when it comes to its guidelines, is going to have to believe that the infection rates are at such a place that our mitigation standards are going to work for that. And the other thing that we're running into, which we didn't talk about before, of the 170 camps that we're working with, almost all of them, and I mean this, are cabin style camps, where you show up and you camp in a bunkhouse or something like that with a cabin counselor for the week and do all those activities. And we're doing our level best to try to separate out the nature of scout camping from that. But at some point, we don't. The battle that we may lose is the complication of dealing with the government entity and confusing the message. And so we want to make sure that we've got a cohort-based plan. And so we want you to feel comfortable that we're looking at both directions for the summer. We're still suggesting that we can do this where buddies can go do merit badges together. All right. It's just that as we move forward and seeing what we're seeing is that we may be leaning more towards a cohort model. And since that has created a significant amount of pain, we want to address that here. So some things to be thinking about. There's a bunch of questions in here. I'm going to jump through some of them after I get done with this particular slide, because there's a lot of what ifs, which is this slide is all about. How we're going to feed people. We have met, and we have about 9 ways we could do it. Maybe not that many, but at least 4 or 5. And so our current plan is to operate the dining style that you've come to know and for each camp. So Camp Baldwin, you'd be, eating in your dining, cooking your own food in your campsite. At Camp Meriwether, you would go and go into the dining hall. Any dining hall camps, that what we would do is do shift feeding so that we can limit the amount of exposure inside the dining hall at any one time. That we wouldn't be doing any family style food, that we would be doing all cafeteria style. So you show up, you walk up, and someone hands you a plate of food, and that's what you get to eat, and things like that. We have seen this work a lot of camps. In fact, we tested it last year at a Cub Scout event, and it worked famously. So we believe that all this can work well. So we are also kind of looking that we're going to have to do a lot of this together. Again, adult support in cleaning and maybe even in helping with the program, especially in a cohort model, is probably going to be something new. So I'm not saying that you all sit around your campsite and you're, chairs drinking your coffee. I know that Scoutmasters are often, teased about that. But my guess is that there is some stuff that we're going to need for leaders that come to camp to be able to do to make camp happen. And it is possible, and we are realize that much like in our state right now, if you're going to go work out in a gym, they've reduced the capacity. If you go into a dining hall, they've reduced the capacity. I don't know what that's going to mean for us, but that is definitely something that we're kind of wondering about what our state will do. So let me just talk about some of the fears involved about the cohort camping model, right? And in the cohort camping model, imagine that your cohort now is a cohort of 10 youth and a couple adults, and you all head from your campsite to the nature area, because today, Monday's schedule is at 9 o'clock, you've got nature. At 10 o'clock, you have free time. At 11 o'clock, you've got waterfront. At 1 o'clock, you've got rifle shooting. At 2 o'clock, you've got climbing. And then at 4 o'clock, you have, let's say, scoutcraft. And so you have a mix between assigned times and stuff. And so you walk in, let's say, to the nature area, and at the nature area, instead of offering 12 merit badges, you may offer 8 or 6. All right, so you get a choice between what merit badges you want to do. Your cohort and 2 other cohorts will be there. Imagine teaching stations that have 3 different color benches, red, yellow, and blue, and your cohort's been assigned red. So all the kids in your cohort get to go pick a merit badge, but they have to sit on the red bench. And we teach them the merit badge. Now, ahead of time, those merit badges will have online pre-work that they can do. It's not that they can start the merit badge, but essentially they'll go online, they'll learn a bunch of the stuff that they can do at home, and they'll come in and they'll fill out the paperwork. Or maybe they don't do it till they get there. So during their free time, they'll work on the paper piece. And then when they get to that merit badge, they're gonna be doing the hands-on stuff. So imagine aquatics, for instance. You show up and there's swimming, rowing, snorkeling, I don't know, and kayaking, whatever these merit badges are. And so they go and stand where they're going to stand, and then and teach their merit badge. But now when they go into rowing, they've already done the safety afloat and all that stuff, and we've already done the swim checks. And so now you're going to go do the J stroke, or you're going to learn to do the on hand stuff. So that's how that would look. When you do the math with the amount of scouts coming to camp and trying to figure out how best to make all that happen, you can't do that and have every scout earn 6 merit badges. So we're going to have to try to limit that, but that doesn't mean they can't have different experience while they're out there, like shooting or climbing or whatever. They can do all those things. They just may not be getting the merit badge. Only people who are working on the merit badge will get the merit badge, but everybody else get to do the activity. Or maybe they don't go with the patrol to that merit badge because they're working on the pre-work for another merit badge. So that could all be happening. The other thing that we can do, and to make it look different and feel different, is that we could make it an experiential piece. So at 1 o'clock, instead of going to handicraft or wherever you might be going, is that now you're going to go to escape room A. And you're in your patrol, will show up there, and you got 50 minutes to escape the challenge, and working together in that. Or there may be a scavenger hunt or a treasure hunt that you will be challenged to do on certain days and things like that. Or after dinner, your patrol will sign up for the airplane crash. And so you're going to go with your sleeping bags and all that out to the airplane crash. And you're going to have to be able to show how to survive from the time there to the next morning. You'll have to find your food. You'll have to, light your fire. You'll have to do all those activities. So, I mean, there's all these different things that we can do to make the experience different and still impactful. So, and again, I think strengthening patrols and teaching leadership are are all that. So, and when I look up here, I'm going to jump into some of these questions. And Chris, if you want to, because we're going to run out of time. Same leaders have to be at camp at all time, not cannot be in shifts. Well, you can. It's just we want the social distancing or the behavioral backup, ahead of time. So you're going to want, as long as whatever the amount of time that they're not going to interact with other people, right? They're just going to stay at home or limit their social interactions during that time. Then we're okay switching off leaders. We just don't want, we want to make sure that pre-screening and that same work is being done. When I get back up here to the top here, so that was a couple of the Phyllis, I guess, asked that question as well. There was a question about the dining halls. I think we've added that as far as eating outdoors and how we might do that. It all depends on what system that we put together. Will we provide campsite dining for Cub Scouts, Butte Creek and Clark? Well, I mean, if we did, the food will be delivered to your campsite. We're hoping that we can do cafeteria style, and that's our current plan. Question was, what happens if they have an elevated temp? Well, it is our hope that we can, do a check on them. I mean, elevated, if it's, 99 is different than if it's 100, right? So, and again, what we'll try to do is do isolation and hopefully do a test would be our hope.
And I would think that we'd be doing our temp checks primarily first thing in the morning. If it's just like the regular checks, if they show it later in the day, they've been running around like crazy, we know that might be something different.
And the point I put out here, especially for Cub Scouts, I mean, if a Cub Scout appears to be sick, we typically send them home. We are not trying to turn them into, they're not feeling good. It's time for them to go home. There's a question from Greg Davis about if Scoutmasters move within the cohorts. The current plan is not that if we're having a cohort, it all depends on the size of your cohort. Now, if your cohort is your campsite, which is what we hope that it will be, then it doesn't matter how that group is split up, adults and youth. However, if the cohorts are down to 10 or 12 people, then you're going to have to choose as to who's going to interact with those. Now, I don't know. I mean, as far as that one goes, we'll go with pretty much what the state tells us to do, and that's one that they will legislate. We're pretty sure.
Todd, could you cover the question on refunds and who deciding not to go to camp or that kind of, and numbers being at the first of the month?
Right. Yes. So the important thing is that as of next week, you will owe $100 non-refundable for everybody who is on your list. Some people say that's not fair because people can't decide and all that, and I think it's completely fair. I think that what you need to do is understand that we need to know who's committed, and if they're not committed and that commitment is willing to pay $100, then I would take them off the list. And the reason for that is that we need to figure out how best to plan for the summer, and we need you guys to tell us. And if you need to reduce your numbers, but you have some sort of story that you'd like to tell us, it's not, hey, listen, our Weebles are going to come in at the end of the month, and we'll know better then. Let us know that. All right, we'll do what we can to work with you. We're not ogres here, but it's important for us to hold this deadline so that we can best plan. Also, a significant amount of our registrations came from rollover events from last year, where people have rolled over, and some of those units don't even exist anymore. And so we need to get a handle on where we're at so we can better plan. And so that's why that is it. So if you have not collected the $100 per scout to attend camp, then I would consider, I mean, dropping your numbers by who you've collected money from or how much you're willing to risk. Because now, that being said, if someone gets sick with COVID, all right, or if we have to make some either reduce participation in some way or cancel camp altogether, you will receive a full refund for those things. Let's see. We've already talked about program guides. How will older scouts be engaged? Well, we think that this experimental model will be really great for older scouts. We're planning on some stuff that they've never seen before. And so they'll be challenged. It'll be fun. They could do it with their older scout buddies and the like. And they're still going to offer much of the same activities that we had before. Oh, good. Thank you. After for Cub Scouts, I'm sorry about this. Cub Scout deadline is May 1st for the $100 discount. I jumped right over that. Also, just to let you know, 2 weeks prior to camp, there is no refund. It's not accepted illness. That's not necessarily correct. At that point, you'll need to fill out a refund request form. And there's a list of things that are part of our refund request that we can do once we have that. But you will owe us the full fee as of 2 weeks prior to camp. And then we will come back and approve refunds later. And again, what about testing and vaccinations? I think it's really important to know that we have moved away from the idea of requiring either. If we're going to have testing, it's something that we will do. However, that says that we were going to want all the units to do basically behavioral social distancing ahead of time, so that you're less likely to bring that into camp. Go ahead and move on to the next slide while I get a couple more questions here. Last year's candy sale, for those of you in our council, our spring sale, has the ability to be moved to this year if you haven't spent it already. And so I would, and there's ways to get more information about how to do that. We have, you can obviously just talk to camping, 492 camping at cpcbsa.org. And no, what's my email? What's the email? That's the wrong email. We'll show you here the email in a minute, but you can ask for make sure that those get applied. We should have sent out information to all the monies that we have available to people already, but if not, let's see. And then quick question here about Cube Camp. We're still on hold while we're finishing a risk assessment. We just finished an ice storm here, and all that risk assessment's been on hold. So I'm hoping to have more information by the end of next week.
I had a question that was in here, came from Facebook, about when will the list of offered merit badges be posted by camp? And that's very much a wild card. You know, we'll post what we think we can offer. We think we'll have that in the March edition, but not scheduled or anything like that. We're talking probably late April, early May, when you might see a close to final copy of any kind of a schedule or certain offerings. So much of it depends on these guidelines. If they say we go one way, we have to go one way. If they say we go the other way, we have to go the other way. So that kind of certitude is not going to be open to us for a little while still. And I know that stinks when it comes to planning. I totally get that. I wish it were different. But yeah, that's where we are.
So a couple things I want to just go over this last slide here. I know if some of you, if you've got to go to work and anything, but this last slide is important. There's several things that you need to do. We already talked about the deadlines for payments. And also, we need you to, on the camp contact form, lets us know if there's other people in your unit that you want to get information, our emails and the like. Our system, though it looks like it will be changing here, only takes one contact or two contacts per unit. And so you may have other people that you want to get the information, and you use the camp contact form do that. I'm not sure if we put that in the links or whatever. Again, we still plan on communicating to you twice a month via email and by this webinar. Also, we're going to give you our information here. Chris, myself, and our team answers questions every day, especially right now. Our phones are ringing off the hook. So, and again, if you can, get your people vaccinated. I don't know currently if that's just going to provide some more freedom for you all going into, especially those who have health issues that make it real challenging. If you're coming from out of council, we want to make sure that you're understanding what kind of check in with your airlines or bus or whatever you're doing about restrictions. And again, remember, it is our plan currently that you don't do a full tour to come out here. So you don't go to the Air Museum and then to the ice cream place and all that stuff. If you want to hit that on the way out, I'm not going to say anything to you about it. That's up to you. But on the way in, we're asking specifically that you would kind of behavioral quarantine, if you will, from large groups.
And I've been down by the Tillamook ice creamery here recently, and you don't want to stand in that line, particularly with a troop of fidgety scouts.
Yeah. And then a couple other things is that we will have the available for if you're 250 miles away or more, you can contact us and show up on Saturday night. Those of you in our council and are closer, please come on Saturday or on Sunday or whatever the first time is. I suppose this is predominantly a Scout BSA policy. The important piece about that, though, is that you're going to need, if you're coming and you think getting here early at 10 a.m. is going to be tough for you, let's say that, or 11 or whatever we decide, and you want a 2 o'clock deadline for your check-in, we can arrange for that. So we'll have those logistics coming on there. And Ezra brought up this question: is how much of the adult leadership will run versus camp counselor run? Well, some of the stuff it all depends on what you guys are prepared to do. The more stuff that you can do, that maybe the more stuff that your unit can do. I don't have a good answer for that yet because we don't have a clear picture from which to give an example. But I mean, it's our plan to teach the merit badges, run the activities, and serve the food. And so, but it may be helpful for you guys to provide the extra supervision that's going to be required, or maybe in camp activities. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be doing with Trail to First Class, how much of that would be an out thing versus an in the campsite thing, and the like. So I guess stay tuned for that. That will be more along the lines of the program guide time when we go. And
yeah, and I would only add that unless we were under a really strict lockdown and couldn't bring the staff, that had to limit the staff camp or contact, that we would not be moving all the way to anything that was anywhere near fully adult leader run. I would not expect that.
All right. And then a Facebook question here is that, will you be able to add afterwards? Well, I have to tell you, there probably is a possibility that you won't. I don't anticipate that. I believe that we will be able to allow you to increase. That's our current plan. Again, we don't know what the state's going to do to us at any time. So there's that caveat. So it's our hope that if you reduce the numbers, right, and everybody does that, then, we're going to have plenty of space. Also, just to let you know, people are dropping like flies. A lot of units, right? And we probably have had a dozen units drop in the last 3 days. And so there's probably more room than not. And so being accurate here would be very important. However, there could be a time where we fill. And if the state says this is your limit, then I can't allow any more people to come, then that's, pick another week to come. So I guess that's the answer there. Okay, so here's a list up here of our upcoming webinars and that we'll be doing. And plus, we'll probably have a June pre-camp meeting as we go forward as well. So Chris, do we have any missing questions before we finish this up?
There's one question Nicole's wondering about a cub. This is it's kind of specific. I might need to get more details offline here, but it sounds like a cub who was registered for camp last year, their deposit was rolled over for the coming year, but now it's going to the troop. How does that apply to them going to camp this year? I think that's what I'm understanding it to be, but I'm not sure.
So if it's about your Cub Scout wanting to go to Cub Scout camp because they missed that opportunity last year, even though they're Scout age, we can't allow that. However, we are looking at having some family-based camping that you guys can come, and maybe some of those type of activities will be available. But as far as, Cub Scouts have to go to Cub Scout camps. Scout BSA youth needs to go to Scout BSA camp, and that's our national standard thing. It's not an us thing. So we'll need to, do that. As far as money is concerned, you'll want to contact our support for that, and ultimately, the Cub Scout PAC would be the one who's holding on to your funds. So it'd be up to them to make that change. It wouldn't be us. People don't register as an individual for summer camp. They register as units. So you'll have to look at that. However, contact us and we're happy to guide you through all of that. All right. Next. Oh, okay. So again, I don't know how the best way to say this and say this again, this month. If you are expecting that summer camp's going to look like it's always been, then you are in for a world of hurt. But if you're looking for an opportunity to work with us to put on a very creative, innovative, impactful experience that looks different, that has a lot of the same elements of camp, then I think you're going to be pretty excited about what we have. In fact, I do believe that scouts that come will always talk about this summer, because there'll be things that will happen this summer that they'll have never experienced before, and they may never experience again. And so, yes, it's going to be tied down. It's going to be things, I happened to, in 1980, I was scheduled to go to Camp Spirit Lake. And I lived on the Toutle River, and I lost both my house and my summer camp all at the same time. However, I always remember Spirit Lake by the Sea, held at Camp Clark in 1980. That experience was not what we were planning on, not what we expected, but it was an experience of a lifetime. So I just want to let you know is that if we can just kind of get a little creative, work together, that we're going to find that the experiences that we build together, as opposed to waiting, for the Cabana boy to show up with your mint. We want, you to get up and go get your own mint. And so we're going to work together to make sure that our kids have a very positive impact over this summer. Last slide, I think. One more slide. All right, and I don't know if you can see this, but Jeanette Leach, 492.camping@scouting.org. She will handle all your reservation questions, along with 492.volunteerservices@scouting.org. We'll also handle those types of questions. Chris Harold's information is there. My information is there. And our current Scoutmaster or camp director information is on this slide as well. We want you to know that we do stand ready to assist you and help you, especially when we start getting into the nitty-gritties of these questions. And so, with that, feel free. We'll hang up. Thank you all for showing up and being here. We're going to make some big and bearing with us as we run a little over, and we look forward to putting on a great summer for you. Those of you that still have questions, Chris and I will be happy to stick around and continue to answer questions until all questions have been answered.
Awesome. Well, thanks, gang, for joining us today. And thanks to Todd and Chris for just all of the diligence and the entire team and the volunteers. I mean, it is it is impressive, and the quality of programming that you are all putting together, the creativity and the passion is obviously everybody who's attended can see and hear it. And even though it's been in flux since almost a year ago, and so I'm excited about it. I know the kids are excited about it. Every scout is going to be so excited to go back to camp, and same with the adults too. So thank you for just diving in and giving us all these great details. Just as a reminder, we're keeping the slide up here just so everybody can write down any contact information they want here. But also check out this webinar. Will be repeated, if you will, with new information. Summer camp webinars every last Wednesday of the month until we have summer camp. So just be sure to tune in. We're scheduling our upcoming webinars as well. We'll have more information on that in your Compass Points newsletter, as well as on Facebook. Have some fun things in the works, but just need to confirm them. So anyway, that's what's going on there. But thanks you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to toss them in the chat or toss them onto Facebook there, and we will get answers to you. Or of course, you can toss us an email at any of these emails as well. It doesn't appear that we have any more.
Yeah, I think Nicole still has one about what camp we would allow a scout to attend. And again, it all, if they're registered in if they're Webelos age, and which means that if they're in the 5th grade going into 6th grade, or 10 turning 11, and earned the aero flight, they're now scout age. So that would mean this summer they would need to attend, if they're going to attend camp, either a family camp with the family, which we are planning to have. We definitely have them. We will have them scheduled for the Memorial and Labor Day weekends, but we're also looking at other options for the summer. Or that scout would need to attend a Scout BSA camp, Meriwether Baldwin Pioneer. However, if that person is a first-year Webelo and is, then they could attend a Cub Scout camp or younger. So up until and so Tigers and older can attend summer camp. So if they have completed their Lion year, they're now a Tiger. If they are going into kindergarten next year, they are not allowed to go to Cub Scout resident camp by the BSA standards. Hopefully that answers that question.
Excellent. We did have one more here that some folks are a new linked troop. We would like to be located in a campsite that is same or connected. How would you advise us to register?
I just put it in there. I'm sorry. Register each troop separately from each other because they are different troops. But the camp director, that we do pre-camp calls, and on those pre-camp calls, you just want to confirm that that we know that you're a linked troop and you'd like to camp with the other. Again, things like cohort size and cohorting might come into play there, but that's the only complication I can see. Depending on the size of each group. But
one of the things that came up,
are you be together.
Yeah, and Shirley, one of the things that came up with this is that in some linked troops, they have a combined treasury and person has handled the money, and there's every ability for you to pay with one check for both units. You just need to do that when that comes, or go online with a card. And then as far as communication wise goes, you just want to make sure that whoever's in charge of that is communicating together. We do not have any issues right now with cohorts sharing campsites with linked units, and there's no regulation stopping us from doing that. And so we would continue to work on that. So.
Excellent. One last question, unless Chris sees other ones. There was one about, what about parents arriving or leaders arriving late or splitting time with other adults?
It is our plan to allow that to happen. However, we are going to ask for the same requirements that we have for any unit. What we probably won't do is, in the past we would do these special barbecues or all that, and we're not planning on having any camp-wide meals, not in the way that we've done them before, in that way, as far as the entire camp together eating a barbecue or whatever. And so we're not looking at parents being able to come up for that. However, exchanging of leaders will work as long as the leaders have, been able to show that they've been able to participate in the social quarantine piece. Now, if their job is such where that makes that really hard, have them contact us. We'll work something out. But as a general rule, before you go do these things, we want to make sure that people are, doing your level best to, if you don't have to go into work, you can work remotely. If you don't have to interact with people, if there's a group of people going out tomorrow night to go listen to a band at an outdoor place that's open, chose not to go do that. And like for that, I mean, we're still even debating whether or not our summer camp staff will be allowed to leave camp once they arrive. So we'll want to, we have them in mind too, as far as how we work with them. All righty.
All right, I think that's it. Chris, did you see any other questions rolling in? I did not. Okay, great. Awesome. And Chris, you're muted.
Yep.
There you go.
Thanks everyone for the work you're doing to make this happen. This is it's a big burden to plan with uncertainty, and thanks for your patience, your flexibility, all those things that you're having to be while we're working together to get our plans in order for you.
And I see that Nicole's hand is raised. So, maybe what you'll need to do is contact us via email, and we'll set up a time to answer your questions.
Actually, here, I can allow her to talk if she has a question. Nicole, did you have a question?
Hi, yes. No, you guys answered the question for me.
Okay.
Great.
I just wanted to make sure, because of the age, because they had to miss out last year, because it was canceled, that they would still get the chance to go. So they'll be pretty bummed, but.
Well, again, is this going to be the Scouts' first year at summer camp, at Scout BSA summer camp?
They've never been to a camp as a Cub. So that's why they were really they were going to go to Butte Creek too. So.
Well, the nice thing too is that we will be offering the ability for them to sign up to do horse rides and other things too. In fact, you can even sign up.
Yeah.
To do that. And so, and then again, as we look at doing family-based camping, some of those activities that you feel like you might be missing out are things that you can do with your entire family. And we don't care whether or not you bring Uncle Joe or, as long as the COVID rules allow us, bring your, your family to those activities. And so, you're, whether you got a 3-year-old or a 19-year-old, you can bring them all and do the activities as well. So we're looking at family-based activities for that too. All right, thanks, Chris. Oh yeah, Chris.
Awesome. Great. Well, excellent. Well, thanks again, gang, for joining us, and thanks to Chris and Todd and the entire team and the volunteers, and quite a gaggle of folks who have been helping us out here. And as Chris was saying, just thank you so much for all of your patience out there in this scouting world. This is it's unique and different, but as Todd says, it'll be fun. I guarantee that Todd is one of the most creative guys I know, and he is devising. I can see the wheels turning of what the theme is going to be. So your kids at the Scouts are just going to have a great time, no matter what it is. So anyway, thanks again for joining us, and tune in next week. Watch your emails for the topics and all of that kind of stuff, and the signups and the links and everything else. And check out our website for every other piece of information you possibly could ever want. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you all next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.